gas. We turn now to Dan Briette. He's president of Sempra Infrastructure. Mr. Briette served as Secretary of Energy under President Trump. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being back with us. Give us your take on what's going on right now with this Nord Stream pipeline.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's great to be back with you. It's unfortunate what's happening, obviously, in Europe as a result of the war in Ukraine. Mr. Putin's plans, though, are not abundantly clear. We know initially what his steps are, and they're very worrisome. The reduction of the capacity of Nord Stream is really, really troublesome for Europe, especially as we try and rebuild storage capacity or storage facilities in the summer months in order to get ready for the winter months. So I think Europe is taking some very aggressive steps to ensure that those storages are filled. I saw the plan that they just released to reduce consumption by roughly 15%, I guess, in the next few months in an effort to fill those storages up. David, there's two things that we can usually do to address these types of situations. You can either do energy conservation and energy efficiency measures, which are very important. We can also increase production, and we can also increase our ability to get those products like LNG to markets. So infrastructure development becomes critical in these times, and I would urge the Europeans to look at both of those potential solutions as they move forward.
To what extent can the United States supply more liquid natural gas to Europe and make up some of the deficit?
Well, I think we have an enormous capacity here, but it's important for us to remember just how much gas comes through the Nord Stream pipeline as well as other pipelines that feed Europe. It's a very big number. So the ability of the United States in the short term may be somewhat limited. We can't simply build that much infrastructure in the amount of time that would be needed to serve Europe this winter. But nonetheless, companies like mine, Sempra Infrastructure, we're very busy building liquefaction export facilities here in the United States. We just announced a very large potential partnership with ConocoPhillips to develop a facility in Port Arthur, Texas. We also have underway a facility in Cameron Parish, Louisiana, where I grew up, doing much the same thing. We're going to add a fourth LNG train for export there as well. So we're taking those very aggressive steps here in the United States to develop and build that type of infrastructure.
So Dan, you obviously are very involved in natural gas, but let me ask you one question about oil. And the proposal that is being promoted, putting a cap, limiting how much people will pay for Russian oil, does that make sense to you? Is that doable? Could it be effective?
I think it's an interesting idea to think about. I'm not quite sure I understand fully what the outcome would be. It seems, at least on first blush, to have some merit, but then again, you have to counter what Mr. Putin's move would be, and I think obviously the first move he may make would be just to not sell oil at all at any price, or he'll sell it to someone else like the Chinese or perhaps others who might evade the sanctions or just disregard the program altogether. And if he were to do that, then I guess we'd have to question the effectiveness of that type of an approach.
Dan, obviously energy is in a lot of turmoil around the world, in part because of the Ukraine war, but also because of the conversion, the transition away from fossil fuels. Given what we're seeing over the last year or so, do you think this all will speed up the move away from fossil fuels or slow it down, or maybe neither?
I think the short answer is it's probably neither in the near term. The energy transition will continue, but today, as we look across the world and we look at solar technologies, wind technologies, other renewable technologies, they're still somewhat dependent upon baseload electricity, and that means natural gas and perhaps other fuels stay in the mix for quite some time. And I think that's why you've seen the Europeans move very recently to add natural gas and nuclear to its green taxonomy. There's a recognition there, and until we develop battery storage that is both grid scale and long duration, renewable technologies will remain somewhat dependent upon natural gas and those baseload electricity generators.
So Dan, when you were Secretary of Energy, you and I talked about this a year, 2, even 3 years ago. And one of the issues is storage as well as transmission for the renewables. Have we made any progress in the last 2 years?
Yes, I think we have. The battery technologies have come a far way toward what I just mentioned, grid scale, long duration. The challenges we face now are economics. So when you build a battery that large, it's obviously very expensive. And the technology is still somewhat nascent in that we have to reduce the scale of it. The size of the batteries are very large themselves. But as you and I talked about, David, some time ago, we were very proud at the Department of Energy to dedicate one of our national laboratories in Washington State exclusively to this type of research and development, exclusively on battery technologies, so that we can bring the best and brightest minds in America and around the world together to help solve this equation.
Mr. Secretary, it's always great to have you on. Really appreciate you taking the time. That's Dan Buriette. He's president of Sempra Infrastructure and, of course, former Secretary of Energy under President Trump. Coming up, we get an update on yesterday's Maryland primary.